For what is now more than a quarter century, fans have wondered what, where, why, and how is the One Piece. But more recently, we've also wondered what is Luffy's other dream that Oda has kept hidden from us all thus far. Yet he's had Luffy share it with his brothers, Shanks, and even his entire crew. Not to mention the fact that this is the very same dream that Gol D. Roger once had, one that brought Shanks to tears and even surprised the likes of Odin and Whitebeard. But Luffy has had this dream since he was as young as 7 years old. So what dream could not only be befitting of a young carefree child like Luffy, but also that of the last king of the pirates? Could this secret dream be what really made him a perfect match for the fruit of the sun god? Well, since it seems that he needs to find the One Piece first, we should probably start by discussing exactly what and where that is, as well as what Luffy will use it for. And that was the focus of my first Afro Tale video, but there is just so much more evidence to add on at this point, and it has been a while since that came out, that I thought the easiest way to do this was just run back through the major points of that video, but sprinkle in all the new information that we now have as well, which even explains more about the One Piece, the meaning of the Will of D, and even Luffy's second dream. And as much as I'd love to dive right into what the One Piece is and why our own singing skeleton is a 90-year version of Joy Boy's 900-year history, I think the more logical place to begin is by discussing where it is located, which is Laugh Tale, of course, but how has nobody managed to find this island in over 800 years other than Roger himself? Inuyarashi told us that you need all 4 lode poneglyphs in order to find it, but where could this island possibly be that nobody else has ever found it without them? What could be on these ancient stones that somehow take you to a place that nobody else is able to find? It's almost like the instructions are just so specific that nobody would ever bother going there unless they were specifically told to do so. And that takes us to one of the most unsuspecting islands in all of One Piece, Long Ring Longland. While many have disregarded this arc because of Foxy and the fact it's sandwiched between 2 of the highest highs in the pre-time skip, I think it holds one of the most underrated secrets in all of One Piece, which is this panel right after we arrive to the island, where they were told that everyone on the island stretches longer and taller than normal because they feel free. And that's exactly how Luffy's powers work in Gear 5th. How is an entire island of people able to do something so similar to the powers of Luffy, and apparently even Joy Boy, because they both had the same fruit? Even the animals and the bamboo were doing the same exact thing. And the person who told them this was named Tanjit, who appeared in Chapter 0 of One Piece. What could possibly be the secret behind this island? It's almost like it gives a passive effect to everyone around it, and it almost reminds me of what Vegapunk said about the origin of devil fruits, and how they represent the furthest branches of evolution, as if doing X or Y finally became possible. It's like the people of Long Ring Longland achieved this naturally and evolved in a similar way to Luffy when he ate that fruit. Could it be that a past user of the fruit left some kind of effect on the people of that island? I mean, when Luffy awakened, he was able to make Kaido stretch as well. So we already know that this fruit isn't just limited to making the original user stretch, but it can also do the same to others. And since it seems that the last user of the fruit was Joy Boy, maybe that tells us that there's actually a connection between him and this island. Not to mention the fact that Long Ring Longland seems to have some bizarrely perfect natural deterrents to keep people away from it, starting with its very peculiar and almost unnatural shape. I mean, it's a ring of 10 different tall points that are connected under the sea. However, the catch is that each of these 10 points count as the same point on the log pose. So no matter which point you land at, the log pose will end up pointing you away from Long Ring Longland entirely instead of another point. That makes sailing to each point very difficult and almost impossible, and each pirate would only see one of the 10 points. And on top of this, each point seems to be an empty plane, and Luffy was by far the most excited one to go check it out once the crew got there, which shows that maybe only people with Luffy's temperament would even bother checking this island out in the first place. But the most important phenomenon is Aqua Laguna, which only occurs once per year, and it's a giant storm that causes very high tides in Water 7 while lowering controlling the tides at Long Ring Longland and revealing that it actually looks like a crown. And what kind of people wear crowns? Kings, of course, and a crown-shaped island sounds like a fitting place for someone like the Pirate King. And Kokoro said that the only ship capable of traveling during this storm was the Sea Train, and when the tides are lowered, the crown also acts as a border so that people can't get inside. So you'd have to anchor your ship inside the crown a day ahead of time if you wanted to be there when the tides were lowered. This kind of reminds me of Wano's borders, except almost in reverse, where majority of the year the borders are actually open, but then they're closed off just one day a year when you can get closest to the bottom. And all Wano had underneath it was the ancient weapon Pluton and an ancient 800-year-old city, so maybe there is something beneath Long Ring Longland as well. I mean, even Water 7 has an ancient city beneath it, and it's not that far away. And we even had a filler episode where Sanji learned that the water from Aqua Laguna contains salt from the All Blue, and people from the island collected off their rooftops after the storm. And sure, it's a filler episode, but I'd be a fool not to at least mention it. But all of these factors tell me that Aqua Laguna may be a lot more important than we think. And I really can't imagine a reason for anyone to bother being inside of Long Ring Longland on that specific day, given the storms and sea level issues, unless they had instructions to do that very thing. And given what I said earlier about how people from that island stretch out just like Luffy does and Joy Boy presumably did, I think it's safe to say that we need to take a closer look at this place. And I'd like to give a quick shout out to an awesome creator named Denden Kushi who talked about some of these points as well, so make sure to check them out down below. So how does this all connect to Laugh Tale exactly? When we saw Roger's crew go there, it looked calm and peaceful, and nothing like Long Ring Longland or a raging storm, and that's because I think what happens here on this day is the entrance to Laugh Tale. I mean, I'm sure there's a little more to it than simply being in that circle on that specific day, because someone would have serendipitously found it at some point, so there is likely another trick that you need from the poneglyphs in order to enter safely. Maybe one of the 10 points of the island has something special to it, maybe you need a password, maybe there's some ancient kingdom technology involved, or maybe you just need to sing Bink Sake like Roger's crew was doing on the way there. But whatever it is, I think it occurs at this place and at this time, and that's how you enter the island we've all been looking for. But that leads to two questions. How far down is Laugh Tale beneath Long Ring Longland, and why does Aqua Laguna even happen at all? And this is where I need to introduce Joy Boy's not-so-little friend named Davy Jones. Davy Jones was first mentioned during the main event of the Long Ring Longland arc, which was the Davy Back fight versus the Foxy Pirates. And this fight was said to originate on Pirates Paradise Island, which is otherwise known as Hachinosu and the place where Rox and Blackbeard have called their home base. While Oda definitely made this fight as goofy as he possibly could, it's really a pirate battle for human resources at heart. Its purpose is to take members of the other crew and potentially cause them to not be pirates ever again by taking the crew's flag. And those who swap sides have to swear by the great Davy Jones that they remain loyal to their new captain. So whoever Davy Jones is, they obviously have a direct tie to the origins of this fight. So who in the world is this Davy Jones? Well, in our world, Davy Jones is one of the most infamous seafaring tales that we have, and it's the origin for the classic term Davy Jones locker, which is usually used to describe the depths of the sea where many sailors have perished. But Oda himself even went out of his way to give us a clear explanation of the guy in SBS 38, where he said that in general, there was a lying, no-good pirate named Davy Jones, a greedy deck chief who was famous for putting all the crew's valuables in his own locker. He was so wicked, even for a pirate, that one day the devil himself cursed Davy to live at the bottom of the sea forever. Now, there's a lot to unpack there, but the first thing I want to highlight is that Oda's depiction of Davy Jones looks a lot like the Tanjit guy that I mentioned earlier from Long Ring Longland. Not only has Tanjit appeared in Chapter 0, not only does he know about everyone stretching because of their freedom, but he even resembles Oda's version of Davy Jones. I mean, why is this dude so important? And I think it's also important to highlight how bad Davy is considered considered to be. I mean, he was so bad that he was cursed to the bottom of the sea forever. But throughout One Piece, we've seen time and time again that the victors are the ones who write the history. So bad people are viewed as good and vice versa because it all depends who's writing it. So there's probably a lot more to the story about Davy Jones than we've seen thus far. And Oda also said that Davy put all of the valuables in his own locker. So whoever this Davy guy was, the treasures he collected were so grand that he was cursed to the bottom of the sea. And here we are trying to find a great treasure, being the One Piece, that may just be under Long Ring Longland where we first heard of Davy Jones in the first place. And even in our world, Davy Jones is one of the oldest pirate legends around, with some publications dating as far back as the 1700s. And while the exact origin of this legend seems unclear, there seems to be a tie to the legend of Jonah, as in Jonah and the whale. And quick shout out to another great creator named Dire Regulus who actually helped me discover some of this originally, so please go make sure to check him out down below. But in case you're unfamiliar with this legend, the story of Jonah, or Jonas, is a legend that primarily appears in Christianity, Judaism, and Islam. And generally speaking, it's about someone who refused to deliver God's judgment and then was eaten by a giant fish, usually depicted as a whale, for some amount of time before being released and returning to their divine mission. The name Jonah or Jonas is obviously the inspiration for the Jones portion of Davy Jones, but all these J.O. names can only make me think of one person, being Joy Boy. We've seen Luffy use nicknames that are very close to his real name, like Lushi or Luffy Taro, so I feel like there's some merit to this Jones or Jonah or Joy Boy thing, and we can't ignore the entire fact that he was eaten by a whale. And this is where Joy Boy's connections to Brook get even stronger. Not only are they both dudes who died and came back to life in some form or fashion from a devil fruit, not only do they both have connections to music thanks to the Drums of Liberation, not only does Brook sing the same song that the Pirate King sang on his way to Laugh Tale that also features Brook's laugh within the song, and not only did we see Brook in front of the moon with the same sun god Nika pose as Luffy in Gear 5th, but we also have to remember what Brook's dream is. The reason he continued to fight for his shadow even after his whole crew died right in front of him, and that was for Laboon. And Laboon's species is literally called an island whale, and they can even keep an entire island inside of them, as we saw with Crocus, who he himself had been the Laugh Tale before that and also designed the inside of Laboon. And we've even seen some other island whales, like from the New World, who love listening to Brook sing Bink Sake, almost as if they recognized it. And the Sea Kings even alluded to the fact that the whales will be happy when the two sovereigns finally meet again. I mean, we've even seen whales floating in the sky in Vegapunk's lab and many other references throughout the story that show they're obviously important, like the whale tree on Zou, for example, which had a road poneglyph inside. So honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if Joy Boy was friends with his own whale companion, much like Brook was, but this whale's name was Davy. So the legend of Davy Jones in One Piece might actually be about two people, Jones or Jonah, who is actually Joy Boy, and the whale that ate him named Davy, who now holds Laugh Tale and the One Piece inside of him. And I think it's quite possible that Davy was just Joy Boy's own ship, which parallels Laboon because not only did Luffy paint his Jolly Roger on him, which is an indicator of being a pirate ship already, but Luffy also stuck that mast right into the top of his head, which is almost like what you'd see on a ship. Not to mention the fact that we met Laboon at the very start of the Grand Line. And we also met more island whales at the start of the New World. So maybe at the end of our journey, we meet another whale who is waiting for his friend to return. One who contains Joy Boy's grandest treasure inside, being the One Piece. But the question is, where has Davy been waiting? Well, if the legend that Oda told us is any indication, then he's at the bottom of the sea, and has probably been there since the Void Century. And this could maybe even tell us something about the origin of the Davy back fight. I mean, after all, this fight was all about getting other crew members onto your own side. And the name Davy is in the fight's name to begin with. So maybe the Davy back fight was actually a fight to get Davy back. Or, as my comments pointed out before, it could have been a fight on Davy's back. And remember, we've already met Zunisha, who is a confirmed animal companion of Joy Boy, and they are massive. Maybe there are other massive creatures lying in wait around the world for his return, and if Zunisha's size is any indication, then a whale like Davy could be beyond anything we've seen yet in the story. It was even noted that only the king of the fishmen, like King Neptune, can speak with the whales, and obviously his child ended up being Poseidon, who is an ancient weapon that had an apology written directly from Joy Boy himself. And as I mentioned earlier, the Sea King said that the whales would be delighted in anticipation for the day that the two sovereigns meet. It's almost like there's something special between Joy Boy, Poseidon, and the whales that we have yet to discover. And I think that's all about meeting back up with their whale friend named Davy. And maybe that's what the Will of D is all about, since, you know, Davy does start with the letter D. Maybe Joy Boy's crew carried on the letter D as a way to carry on Davy's will so that they ultimately return to him in the future. Maybe Joy Boy's 900-year journey spanning from the beginning of the Void Century is equivalent to Brook's 90-year life that he's had thus far, like dying and coming back to life just to meet that whale once again. One of my members named 3Day even sent me this panel that shows Usopp right after we met Laboon and learned about the Rumbar Pirates, where he says that it's the heartbreaking story of a whale that never lost faith in his friends. That could be the same thing with Davy. Nami and Crocus even confirmed to us that Laboon can understand human speech, so Davy's probably been holding on to that promise just like Laboon has. And there's even an additional angle to this Will of Davy idea that somehow makes this even deeper than it already is. And I want to shout out Threevil, who discovered this with me during a recent collab that we had on the channel that I'm calling the Davy Dak Fights, and I'm holding one with a new creator every single week, so make sure to subscribe if you'd like to check those out. But this Davy idea could even tie to the idea of Deva from Hinduism, which is from the same mythos as Hanuman and Sun Wukong, and we know that this mythology definitely connects to Luffy because of his Bajrang gun against Kaido. Bajrang is just another name for Hanuman, and in Road to Laugh Tale we saw some of Oda's sketches for this moment, and it literally said Hanuman Monkey God next to the attack. And where Deva comes in is that it's a term that's also from Hinduism that essentially indicates a deity, like a god or something heavenly or anything of excellence. Basically, any supernatural being would have been a Deva. And I feel like I'm underselling their importance a little bit here because there is a lot more to know about them, but just go check out Threevil's video if you want to know more. But why do I think Deva has any kind of connection to Davy Jones? Well, that would be because of the feminine version of Deva, which is Devi. So now that we have both Davy and Devi, I mean, regardless of the spelling, they almost sound the exact same. We came to almost the same word from two totally different angles. It's like we combined one of the oldest and most well-known pirate tales, being Davy Jones, with one of the most well-known monkey mythologies, being Hanuman and the Deva or Devi. Maybe it's both a nod to the strength that this family possesses whenever they carry the Will of D, but also the whale that they're all meant to meet again at some point in the future. But alright, let's back up just a little bit, because the reason we even started talking about Davy Jones in the first place was because of Long Ring Longland, where I basically said that the entrance to Laugh Tale has a good chance of being there. But now I'm talking about how Laugh Tale and the One Piece are inside of a giant whale named Davy. So how can both of these be true, and what does any of it have to do with Agua Laguna? Well, thanks to you guys in the comment section, specifically one of my members named Matt Cypher who commented this first, I think the answer is clear. The way we connect a massive whale, a giant crown-shaped island, and an annual tidal wave is the blowhole. While whales live in the sea, they are actually mammals that need to breathe air just like we do. And remember, Davy is supposedly cursed to the bottom of the sea forever. And if he is actually a whale, then my man's definitely needs some kind of way to breathe air from the surface. The longest a whale has gone in our world in between breaths is just 222 minutes. But of course, this is One Piece. We've had a woman hold a baby inside of her for 2 years. So I assume Davy can hold his breath for longer than 222 minutes. Maybe something like 1 entire year. And perhaps that breath is the very thing that causes Agua Laguna. When it exhales, it could push a tidal wave over to Water 7 as a result. And if that filler episode about the salt on the rooftops ends up being true, then I don't think I could come up with a more perfect explanation than this. Many people have theorized that the All Blue will come into existence happens when the red line is destroyed, because every sea will finally connect again, which makes sense since the all blue is supposed to have fish from every sea. And Davy would have existed back when the world wasn't divided by the red line, so he might have at least a small version of the all blue inside of him, and that's what comes out every year during Agua Laguna. And I know that wave is absolutely huge, but it could just be a fraction of Davy's size. I mean, think about Joy Boy's other animal companion that we already know of, being Zunisha, who is an 800-plus-year-old Natame no Rita elephant that is several magnitudes larger than any other elephant you'd normally see. It's always possible that the awakening of the Nika fruit had something to do with this extreme size, but either way, we have precedent that Joy Boy has massive animal friends, so Agua Laguna could just be a small portion of what could almost be an entire ocean inside of Davy. And you know, this led me down an interesting train of thought where elephants and whales have some very uncanny similarities. Elephants are the largest mammal on land, while whales are the largest mammal in the sea, and they're both coincidentally capable of shooting water above them naturally. Elephants do this to clean themselves with their trunk, which we saw with Raizo when he captured that water to use in Onigashima, and whales do this anytime they use their blowhole. And since we know Zunisha was one of Joy Boy's companions back in the day for sure, I think there's definitely a chance that we'll see a whale waiting for him somewhere too, and that's Davy. And while his blowhole causes Agua Laguna during the exhale, I think the inhale could be what brings us to Laugh-Tale, since, you know, it's inside of him. And remember when I said Long Ring Longland is a crown shape? Well, that fits perfectly with all of this, since a crown would sit on someone's head, and it might just be surrounding the blowhole area in the first place. It's like Long Ring Longland's shape simultaneously signifies that this is where the Pirate King becomes crowned, but it's also a perfect shape to keep people out temporarily and when the tides are lower. So that way, only those who are inside of the ring ahead of time have a chance of making it down to Laugh-Tale. And speaking of whales and crowns on their head, this is the perfect time to mention the color page for chapter 471, titled My Friend. Here we see a massive whale with a crown on its head, and the rest of the Straw Hats are under the sea in some kind of ruins. Oda's used cover pages many times to foreshadow important things, and of course I could always be reading into it too much, but I'd be a fool not to at least mention this. And to be clear, I do think there may be another trick to all of this. Maybe you need to sing Bink Sake for Davy to not shoot you back out or something like that. Or maybe your ship needs to be coated in something maybe even better than the bubbles. Because otherwise I imagine that someone would have gotten sucked down there serendipitously at some point. So there's probably some other trick you actually need to know to make it down there safely. And that brings me to the next point, which is if Davy is beneath Long Ring Longland, then how much further down is he? I mean, if there was just a gargantuan whale laying on the seafloor, then I would have to imagine that a fishman or a submarine or something would have caught it by now. But anything lower than that would be under the seafloor and basically in lava. I mean, Nami told us before Alabasta that there are even more volcanoes under the sea than on land because of the volcanic activity underneath the seafloor. But remember, this is One Piece. Lava may have stopped Ace, Kaido, and Big Mom, but we're talking about Joy Boy's friend here. And it may have even been his ship as well, so I really wouldn't be surprised if it could travel on pretty much any terrain that he wanted, including lava. And the ancient kingdom was very highly advanced and maybe even more advanced than Vegapunk, so I'm sure there's some way that they'd figure out traveling through lava, like they might have done with Pluton if you want to check out that video after this. And being hidden in lava would be a pretty dang good place to keep people out, so I surmise that Davy is even underneath the seafloor, maybe as far down as the center of the earth itself. I mean, what better place to hide the legendary treasure of the One Piece than the core of the earth? I mean, the sea itself acts as a barrier to the core so that devil fruit users can't get close, and beyond that, almost nobody can survive in lava. It's like the core of the earth has great natural defenses to keep people out even in the One Piece world, much like Long Ring Longland does when it at least comes to the entrance of Laugh-Tale. But the one person who could probably check out the core is Akainu, since he has the lava fruit. But Oda just happened to say that Akainu would find the One Piece in a year if he tried. Maybe all he has to do is slip down into a volcano and look around for a massive whale for a couple days. I mean, how perfect would it be to start our journey in the Grand Line by meeting a whale with an island in him like Laboon, then to conquer literally the whole planet by finding our way to the center of the earth to find another whale with Laugh-Tale inside. And now you may be wondering how anyone safely travels from Long Ring Longland to the center of the the earth without getting fried. And honestly, I think it could be as simple as there's basically a straw. Maybe it's made of the equivalent to wapple metal that connects the blowhole to the surface, and the mechanism only works once a year or something. And I wouldn't be surprised at all if Davy was in some kind of protective dome down there, because I mean, first off, it protects it from the lava, but second off, it would stop anyone who does make it down there from entering unless they come through the proper entrance, which is through Long Ring Longland on that specific day. And if you think about it, the celestial dragon's hairstyle almost looks like a whale tail, and they always wear protective helmets around them. Maybe there's a protective dome around Davy inside the lava as well, and this was one of Oda's many sly foreshadowings in the story. But now that we've covered where Laugh-Tale is and the truth behind Davy Jones, I think it's time to get into that almighty question of what is the One Piece? What's so powerful that it can bring the government to its knees, yet bring the crew of the King of the Pirates to tears of laughter? What's the truth behind this tale full of laughs that has been hidden away for over 800 years? And what secret could our own singing skeleton hold that tells us about Joy Boy's greatest treasure? Well, like I said the first time around, the One Piece is a symbol of the world as it's supposed to be. A world without borders like the red line that split it in two. It's the symbol of friendship that perseveres even after you're nothing but bones. It's the sign that even after 800 years, Joy Boy has come back to meet his whale friend once again. So, ladies and gentlemen, the One Piece is Joy Boy's afro. Like Brook protected his afro to show his whale friend that he has returned, so too did Joy Boy. It's the symbol that can last decades or maybe even centuries that tells Davy his friend is actually back. It also depicts the planet that isn't divided, where the planet is in one piece. The Earth is mostly a big swirling ball of water, not unlike the eddy that we saw in chapter 1060, which Brook just had to say looked like an afro. And if we haven't had enough connections to Davy and Long Ring Longland already, we even saw Luffy wear an afro during the Davy back fight, where he called Foxy Two-Piece Head. If Foxy is Two-Piece Head, then does that not mean Luffy is the One-Piece Head? We even learned that afros give you power thanks to Sanji and Usopp. And didn't Afro Luffy's chest tattoo look a lot like Gear 5th? Or maybe even a little like Rock's Jolly Roger? I mean, the afro is even the reason Luffy won that fight to begin with, because he pulled a mirror out of it to reflect Foxy's attack. And just recently we saw Luffy pull glasses out of his Gear 5 afro against Lucci. There's obviously something important going on with all these afros, and it doesn't even stop there, because we have to talk about Oda's favorite character in the entire series, which is Gaimon. This man is not only a man with an afro, but he's a man stuck in a treasure chest on an island with a bunch of other empty treasure chests, as if the man with the afro is the only treasure. And we even saw Gaimon use his afro to show us his memories, as if he used his own afro to show us the events of his past. And as hard as it might be, hold that thought for just a second, because we also have to discuss Sengoku, who also has an afro and even has another mythical human fruit. Plus he can even turn it into a golden afro with his Buddha form, which reminds me of another god that we've met, being Eneru, who Oda showed us also has an afro. You can't make this stuff up. I wonder who else has been hiding an afro this whole time, but we just can't tell. And while the crew only spent a single chapter with Gaimon, we did actually see him once again in Buggy's cover story. And I think everyone knows how much Buggy loves treasure, right? Well, what do we see during his cover story? Just him trying to steal Gaimon's afro specifically. And we can't forget another legendary afro wielder in Yasuye. He was literally known as the Hedgehog because of his giant afro, but that wasn't really revealed until he was already on the cross and being executed. And I think this scene clearly has some parallel to Jesus Christ, since he also died on a cross. But Jesus is also known for dying and being resurrected, kind of like Brook was, who also has an afro. And Brook can even walk on water just like Jesus did. This is why people have joked for so long that Brook has the Hito Hito no Mi model Jesus. I mean, this picture of Jesus even looks like he's wearing a straw hat. And remember, it's also been said that the D's are gonna bring a storm. And during Strong World, they said that the incoming storm looks just like an afro. And remember, afros are actually made up of a bunch of individual curly hairs, not unlike the swirls that we see on Devil Fruit's and Sanji's eyebrows. And Oda himself even talked about how important swirls were because the planet would be covered in tidal waves if it ever stopped spinning. That spin factor is basically the entire focus of my Void Century video. It's like the afro is not only a sign of an undivided world, but also that of a planet that is swirling as it should be. And we know that every island whale seems to want to destroy the red line, as we saw with both Laboon and the island whales we met in the New World because of their scars. So if Davy truly is a whale that dwarfs even someone like Laboon, then it's probably big enough to destroy the red line. I mean, if these whales could do it themselves, then they probably would have already. They need a bigger whale in order to accomplish that, and that's Davy. Maybe just like how Laboon is waiting at the Twin Capes until Brook arrives with his afro intact, Davy is waiting under Long Ring Longland until Joy Boy arrives with that Gear 5th afro. Or maybe it's as simple as the Drums of Liberation, since that's all Zunisha needed as well. Whatever it is, it's gotta be someone who's awakened that fruit that lets Davy know Joy Boy is back. And needing to use that fruit's awakening to let Davy know that he's back could be the reason why Roger couldn't go any further. If Laboon will only recognize Brook because of his afro, then maybe Davy will only recognize Joy Boy because of the Gear 5th afro. Davy might be waiting underneath Long Ring Longland like Laboon has waited at the Twin Capes, and just like how Laboon will not leave until Brook returns with that afro, I think Davy is doing the same thing. Once someone arrives who's awakened that Nika fruit and has that iconic flaming white afro, Davy will resurface and destroy the red line in the process. But the truth is that the afro is much more than a symbol, because we also know that the One Piece helped the Roger pirates learn everything in the world that day. The truth of the ancient kingdom, the ancient weapons, the 100-year void, and it apparently even let Oden tell the future, since he knew that a certain figure would come to save Wano in his stead in 20 years' time. So even if the One Piece is an afro, it still needs to somehow fill you in on practically every memory of the ancient kingdom. So just like how Gaimon filled us in on his memories through his afro, maybe the One Piece afro is what tells us the memories of the ancient kingdom, which ties us to no one other than Vegapunk. This was something I also discussed in my Dreams video, but maybe the afro works something like Punk Records. Maybe the ancient kingdom did create the bigger version of Punk Records that Vegapunk dreams of, where everyone was connected. At least mentally, you could consider everyone being one piece. So when somebody puts on the One Piece now, they learn literally everything there is to know that the ancient kingdom knew. Or maybe it's just Joy Boy's memories. Or maybe it's something that connects you to another source of information that's somewhere else altogether, almost like an antenna. I mean, if you think about it, you would kind of look like an antenna if you put an afro on, since they usually have a sphere at the top. And Brook's futuristic egghead outfit just so happened to literally have an antenna on top of his afro. But where would this antenna connect you to exactly? Well, maybe the moon. And I recommend checking out this video from Parvision to see how that connects even more. And we even saw Vegapunk holding on to Kuma's memories, which Bonnie was able to experience herself by jumping inside of. So regardless of which mechanism they use, the point I'm trying to make is that you're also gonna get the memories of the ancient kingdom from this afro, on top of it being a symbol for friendship and freedom and the world undivided and all that kind of stuff, and also awaken Davy so he can come and help you in the final war. And thanks to the poneglyphs, I think it's safe to say that preserving the events of the past is of the utmost importance to the ancient kingdom. Everything that you learn on the poneglyphs is available at Laugh Tale as well, and even then some, because like I said, Oden apparently even knew some of the future. But more important than any of that, the afro is something that would make everybody laugh. Imagine approaching Laugh Tale and just seeing a bunch of empty treasure chests, not unlike what Luffy found on Gaimon's island, except there's just one giant afro in the center. And maybe it's a golden afro or just blonde to kind of mimic that like Enel's afro. And I think that's definitely something that would make the entire Roger Pirate crew laugh. While Vegapunk needed the brain fruit to create Punk Records, we know that the Ancient Kingdom was capable of even more than he is. So there's quite a few ways they could have created this thing. And even Kumadori and Chopper talked about spreading your consciousness even into the tips of your hair while learning about Life Return. So maybe Joy Boy stored his memories into that afro through sheer will as well. When Roger said, "Oh Joy Boy, I wish I lived in your era," that's maybe because Joy Boy's consciousness or will or whatever you want to call it is still alive in the afro. I mean, look at Lao Ji. He died and basically willed his soul back into his body. So maybe Joy Boy died and he kind of lives on within the afro to tell people the truth of the Void Century. And as I alluded to earlier, Luffy finding the One Piece will ultimately lead to Davy the Whale resurfacing and probably breaking the Red Line. And I have a pretty strong feeling that Davy is going to end up being a white whale to match the awakening of Luffy and Joy Boy's fruit, because it also parallels Whitebeard and the Moby Dick. Whitebeard was called the man closest to the One Piece, and his ship was called the Moby Dick because it looked just like a white whale who was the star of that story. And Whitebeard used this whale ship to start one of the most devastating wars that the Marines have ever faced, which all started by bringing a white whale ship up from under the sea. What if Oda is paralleling this in the future whenever Luffy finds the One Piece? If Whitebeard was the closest and he rode in a white whale, what does that say about someone who gets even closer to the One Piece? Maybe the fact his name is Whitebeard is also a nod to Luffy or Joy Boy's all-white appearance as well. It could all be a hint that once Joy Boy and Davy the Whale finally reunite, the world's greatest war will have finally begun. And this is where the tale of Davy Jones comes back into play as well, because I found something pretty uncanny while looking through the Wikipedia page for Davy Jones' locker. Near the top of that page is an image of Davy Jones, which seems to be one of the most oldest and more prominent depictions of Davy Jones that we have. And I kinda noticed that his face looks oddly familiar. Maybe like a little something called Onigashima. The skull where all of the fighting occurred looks almost exactly like this image. And it was around for more than 150 years before One Piece started, and it's not like I cherry-picked this either. It's from a popular series from the time period called the Peregrine Pickle. Could that skull that we called Onigashima just be Joy Boy's skull? I mean, Oda would really be cooking if he had Joy Boy return on his own skull, which is exactly where the afro once was if he did have one. And the person fighting him that brought Joy Boy back would have been Kaido, who is an Oni that has horns just like Onigashima does, and he was believed to be Joy Boy by King, who was a Lunarian, who were once the gods of the world. Maybe Joy Boy himself was just an Oni. I mean, Joy Boy could just be Oars, like an older Oars than the one we saw in Thriller Bark, of course, which has been a popular idea on the Marshall D. Preach channel for some time now, and I definitely recommend checking out their video down below. And obviously that skull didn't have the afro on it whenever we saw it, because he kept it at Laugh Tale. But here's something else to chew on. I made a ton of connections between Brook and Joy Boy as it is, but let's not forget what the Jolly Roger looked like for the Rumbar Pirates back in the day. Almost like a distorted version of the Beast Pirates logo, or in other words, almost like Onigashima, or maybe an ancient giant like Oars used to be. And then look at the grave that Frankie made for Brook at the end of Thriller Bark. It's literally that same skull, but the wood behind it makes it look like an afro. It's like there are afros no matter where you look. But now that I've covered where, what, and why the One Piece is, it's time to finally talk about the original thesis of this whole video, which was Luffy's other dream. The one that he will accomplish after finding the One Piece. And if the One Piece really is an afro that gives you all the history of the world, and also awakens a massive whale that breaks the Red Line, then what could possibly come after that? And like I said at the very beginning of the video, Luffy has had this dream since he was 7 years old. So it also has to be something befitting of a child like Luffy. These are the questions I asked myself to find my own conclusion, because no matter what, Luffy is all about freedom. He's told us before that he doesn't even want to be a hero, even if it means he doesn't get the credit like we saw in Wano, where the kids are being taught that it was someone else named Joy Boy. Luffy just wants to continue adventuring and never be held down in any way. So what could come after conquering all the seas and maybe even venturing to the center of the earth? Well, it would probably have something to do with being even freer than all of that, like maybe adventuring to the moon, the other planets, and most importantly, the sun. Maybe his secret dream is the real reason why the sun god fruit chose him over anyone else in the last 800 years. Traveling across all of the seas and becoming king of the pirates on Earth is definitely impressive, but if you think about it, space is basically a much more vast version of the layout on Earth. Space acts just like the sea, and the planets are basically different islands, and we know space had to be relevant in the past because at least one Gorosei has a name based on a planet, and the world nobles are called celestial dragons. And Enel visited the moon where there were literal space pirates, and we learned that the 3 sky races used to live up there a very long time ago, and most importantly, Luffy's fruit is apparently based on the sun god. And in Ohara, we saw Clover had a geocentric model instead of the heliocentric one from our world. The Earth was at the center and all the planets orbited around it, but there was no sign of a sun anywhere. And since Clover has info from the ancient kingdom, I don't think he has a faulty model. And if you think about it, a planet is almost like a spaceship. I mean, we're all riding on the same ball of water through space right now, right? And this was an idea I talked about more in depth in this video here called Redland. But the point here is that there is a lot to see even outside of Earth. And I think Luffy will definitely want to go there after he finds the One Piece. Almost like Enel wanted to do, except Luffy will go far past the moon and all the way to the sun. But Luffy has had his dream since he was a kid, and whatever his exact words are for his dream, they made people laugh. Yet Ace still had a lot of confidence that he was going to accomplish it. So I think that Luffy told them he wants to travel to the sun, and probably that he wants to leave his own mark on the sun so that people know he was there. This would definitely shock the likes of Odin and Whitebeard. I mean, what better symbol of freedom is there than traveling to the sun? And if you left something there for people to see in the future, then literally everyone would know that you were there, or at least that someone was there, which is a feat deserving of someone that has the powers of the sun god. The sun is what gives rise to life throughout the universe. So traveling to it and then also leaving something there to show that you made it would probably be worthy of the title of god. And that symbol would also accomplish one other important thing, and that's proving to every future generation that traveling there is possible. That they should never stop dreaming because someone made it all the way to the sun. No matter how bad things get, no matter how many void centuries we have, no matter who is in control of the world, every single person would be able to look at the sun and know that someone made it there. And remember, 2 of the first people to hear this dream were his brothers, who have both owned the Flame Fruit, and Sabo is now known as Flame Emperor or Entei. Isn't it kind of too perfect that the Flame Emperor and the Sun God are brothers? You'd almost imagine that a Sun God would have powers somewhat like Ace and Sabo have, since they actually control fire, right? And remember, Ace's final attack versus Blackbeard literally had Flame Emperor in the name, and what did it look like? A sun. Could the fact that Luffy is the sun god, but his brothers have the actual powers of the sun, be yet another parallel? And could that be another reason why Luffy was basically chosen by the will of the fruit of the sun god when he was a kid? And since it's Luffy's second dream, it could even parallel his second ship being the Thousand Sunny, meaning it's a vessel capable of crossing 1,000 seas, shining as brightly as the sun. And even when Luffy shared his dream with the crew recently, we saw the Sunny with a surprised reaction, as if it's almost wondering how it's ever going to travel through space and maybe even sail on the sun itself. And even some of the other crew reactions are interesting here as well. I mean, most of them are worried, as you'd expect, but Frankie is really excited, which makes sense if Luffy brought up traveling in space since he gets to design some new stuff. And right after this chapter, we started getting into the Egghead stuff, which might be exactly how Frankie learns enough technology to make it into space in the first place. And maybe maybe the ancient power source has something to do with it as well, and maybe that ties to the One Piece. And Robin's reaction almost tells me like she knows something, but of course she doesn't tell us because that's what she always does. Like maybe one of the poneglyphs she's read before mentioned going to the sun. But I don't think that's all Luffy wants to do once he gets there. Whether it's a flag or the poorly drawn Jolly Roger that Laboon has, or even just a new red line across the planet so it looks like the Straw Hat, this would show that he is not only the true king of the pirates, but it would probably also prove that he deserves the title of Sun God. Wanting to go to the sun might be what made him a perfect fit for the Sun God fruit in the first place, and not just strictly his free and joyful nature. I mean, I'm sure it all ties together somehow, but maybe the reason Oda hasn't told us his dream yet is because it ties so closely to the sun. The reason why Luffy becomes the Sun God isn't just in name only, but maybe he actually visits there. I mean, what if Luffy and Imu's final fight is actually on the sun itself? By leaving some kind of mark on the sun for future generations to see, people would know that anything is possible in this world and that there really is no limit to freedom. It could be a perfect foil to Blackbeard's situation as well, because his powers work like a black hole, and he specifically said that even light can't escape. And we know that light comes from the sun. So while Luffy may want to conquer the sun in his own way by visiting there and claiming it in some form or fashion, maybe Blackbeard wants to literally conquer the sun by taking it for himself. And maybe that has something to do with what happened 800 years ago, and maybe how this story is going to finally end. But hopefully that won't happen too soon. And I want to take a second to shout out all of my amazing members for supporting the channel and helping me make more content like this. But thank you guys so much for listening and even giving me the platform to share ideas like this in the first place. So all I can really ask is that if you enjoyed it, please hit like and subscribe. And if you somehow haven't had enough, then please check out these two videos that you should probably already see on the screen. Later.